Okay, this conversation between Dave Smith and Nick Fuentes is important because it deals with the most controversial and divisive issue on either side at this point, which is Israel and the American-Jewish relationship to Israel. Dave Smith is Jewish, Nick Fuentes is a white Mexican, and I've pulled all of the clips that I think are most relevant to this very important, very controversial underlying disagreement. So let's get into it.
And so I do think one of the things that concerns me with what you're doing, and I guess concerns me with the fact that I think you're winning in a lot of ways. And I don't, but I do worry about this disaster there, is that I do think so much of the energy you're harnessing does get pointed at just regular people. But you are correct in the sense that I'm not saying it's the Jews, which does certainly seem to be, racialism is like catnip, man. Like, it's like you saw it during wokeism and you see it during this iteration. I mean, people love going into that. But if I'm being completely honest, I don't think that's healthy for society. I don't wish to cross that line. Jewish Americans were either the best or one of the best groups on that issue. Jews opposed the war in Iraq way ahead of the general public. And right-wing Christians were like the worst group on that. And so, but again, my target isn't them. My target isn't the people. Right. My target is like the people who propagandized them into believing that. And so if the thing is like, hey, I stopped short at actually naming the Jews, it's like, well, yeah, because I don't think that's right. And I don't yes, there, and we can get into more of this, but no, Barry the dentist has nothing to do with any of this. And he, I think on some level, maybe I'm wrong, but I also don't think you're really trying to gin up hatred toward that guy. And so maybe that's why I stopped short of blaming the Jews. I think it's sloppier and not as accurate.
Okay, so showing my cards here, I more or less completely agree with Dave Smith on this issue. There's enough disagreement amongst American Jews on the topic of Israel that saying just the Jews is generalized and sloppy to the point where it's inaccurate. Dave Smith, Norman Finkelstein, Gabor Mate, all of these people are Jewish and outspoken critics of Israel. And saying the Jews leaves out people like the Christian Zionists, like Ted Cruz, who suck Israel's latkes more than anyone.
The reason is twofold. Number one, as a Christian, growing up in Sunday school, I was taught from the Bible, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of it, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
But to be fair, Nick Fuentes does have a point about how Jewish identity is relevant to this whole conversation.
My big worry is that, is the conversation going to stop at, we need to end all these wars and the neocons are the problem? Because my critique goes further. And it says that it actually does have to do with Jewish identity. Jewish identity is so powerful and so potent. Jews refuse to assimilate. They're so powerful. They're so tribalistic. They're loyal to each other. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And that is actually where the Israel loyalty proceeds from. It's this anxiety. We need Israel because what happens if it goes south here? We need to be powerful in America to prevent a majority from rising up against us. And it's kind of that identity issue, which, and that's why I'm open to talking to you or even somebody like a Bill Ackman or a Sean McGuire or a Shapiro and say, I recognize Jews are a part of America. They always have been, and they're some of the finest Americans actually. But people recognize it cannot go on this way where we have an open society, but they have this loyalty and kind of play by a different set of rules.
Okay, so saying Jews refuse to assimilate is just wrong. However, it is absolutely true that there are many American Jews who view their Jewish identity as more fundamental to who they are than their American identity. And it creates a situation where, for many Jews, their loyalty to the United States is contingent upon the existence of a foreign country like Israel, which serves as a backstop.
Do you ever wonder if one day you'll have to flee the United States?
I mean, I think that every Jew throughout world history who has a brain and knows history has always wondered if a country that is not a Jewish state is going to eternally provide them security guarantees and full citizenship, of course. I mean, that's I think to think that that's why the existence of the state of Israel is the single greatest guarantor of my loyalty to the United States, frankly. Right? Because Israel exists, that means the United States is going to be a more welcoming place for me because Israel is there as a backstop in case anything should go wrong.
But again, it would be completely dishonest to ignore the fact that there are many American Jews who do very clearly care more about America than they do Israel.
So obviously I'm Jewish. Let me just say, I'm not Israeli. I'm American, and
I love that you start the sentence. Obviously, I'm Jewish.
well, I mean, my name makes that pretty clear for anybody who knows how to read the tea leaves. But nonetheless, my position is resolutely America first.
Well, yeah.
Okay, because I'm an American, and it's not that I'm glad that there is a state of Israel.
Yeah.
I wish it well, but our primary responsibility as Americans has to be to America.
But let's listen to Dave's response to Nick's point about Jewish identity.
It's not just like, I'm not claiming like, oh, they just happen to be Jewish. Like their Jewish identity obviously plays a central role in why, they feel the way they do. And there's no question that Jews, I think, and this is something I've, spent a lot of time speaking out against, because I just think it's really, there's a sickness in Jewish culture that I think is unhealthy. I think it's part of it is fundamentally built into the religion, that like it's about past suffering, is like a big part of it. But the Holocaust looms so large in particularly like my parents' generation and up. I think not as much with the younger generation, but it looms so large, and there is this kind of like feeling of like, look, the Holocaust happened, and then we created our own state so that it never happens again. And anything short of that means another Holocaust happening, and then it's not right. Like it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so I think this is an accurate critique of Jewish culture and the degree to which, the Holocaust lies at the center of Jewish identity in many ways. And there's plenty of left-wing Jews like Norman Finkelstein who make the exact same critique. According to Norman Finkelstein, there's a world of difference between the Nazi Holocaust, which is the actual historical event, and the Holocaust, capital T, capital H, which is the ideological narrative around the Holocaust. The Holocaust is an ideological representation of the Nazi Holocaust. Like most ideologies, it bears a connection, if tenuous, with reality. Its central dogmas sustain significant political and class interests. Indeed, the Holocaust has proven to be an indispensable ideological weapon. Through its deployment, one of the world's most formidable military powers with a horrendous human rights record has cast itself as a victim state, and the most successful ethnic group in the United States has likewise acquired victim status. Finkelstein goes on to point out how many Jews regard the Holocaust as the inevitable climax of Gentile hatred towards Jews, and how it's essentially seen as a mental pathology that infects the mind of non-Jews. And there's some people that do believe this, with the accusation that Jew hatred is built into the DNA of certain races being a common talking point, whether it's from Fox News hosts like Mark Levine, or Josh Hammer, who's the guy that debated Dave Smith at Charlie Kirk's event on the topic of Israel. But one thing I want to be clear about is that I don't think it's fair to say, if you're Jewish and you're worried about the rise of anti-Semitism, that somehow makes you delusional or paranoid. As people watching this know, I am in fundamental agreement with pre-Daily Wire Jordan Peterson, whose entire, philosophy of psychology basically centers around the fact that all of the worst atrocities in human history were done by human beings who are just like you and I. And so that means that the capacity for that type of horror is present everywhere. That doesn't mean it's likely. It's sort of like the Second Amendment where, yeah, the capacity for tyranny exists for sure. And even though it's not likely to happen, you're not touching my guns. But even Nick Fuentes points out that the rise of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism is very real.
By the way, I'll give you another concession because I want to be objective. There are people that are legitimately hating Jews right now.
There are.
I saw in Florida, they're pulling up on Jews with water pistols and spraying them with water. And I got on my show and I said, fuck that.
Yeah,
I said,
and I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I don't believe in that. I'm not a piece of shit. That video bothered me in particular because if people start to think it's okay to do that, the ADL isn't necessarily wrong about the idea that it is slippery slope. You pull up on somebody with a water pistol. Okay, what if it's a paintball gun next time? Is that really okay? That people are going to be harassed and shot at with a airsoft gun or a paintball gun? No, that's bullshit. And that's denying basic dignity, basic rights. That's not Christian. That's not American. And there is an excess of that. And I agree that it should be sort of contained.
Now, look, that's great stuff. And there's a big part of me that wants to believe and does believe that Nick Fuentes is genuine here. But here's what everyone should do. Go to his Rumble page and go read the comments. This is one I've been showing in a lot of my videos that was the top comment on one of his Rumble videos. Although when I went and looked, it's since been deleted, which is interesting. But go to that same video and people are saying, F the Jews, and I actually do want to hurt Jews because they hate white people and all that stuff. So I know there will be Nick Fuentes, fans watching this who will say, Paul, it's totally unfair that you go just cherry pick some comments and use that to represent all of Nick's audience. If we did that to you, then we could just say your audience is full of Autistic Destiny fans. And the thing is, my audience is full of Autistic Destiny fans, but that's separate from the point. If it is the case that Nick Fuentes really does dislike those kinds of comments on his videos, then I look forward to the Groyper Civil War, to the new Night of the Long Knives, where all these freaks are purged from the Groyper movement because it goes at odds with what Nick is saying. And the more Nick Fuentes acknowledges and disavows this bullshit, Jew hatred and whatever you want to call it, and the more that comments like these are condemned, the better. But even then, it's very hard to know when Nick Fuentes is, lying or just being ironic, because he said to Candace Owens that he thought Dave Smith was a psyop and was being purposefully selected to control the narrative, which he apparently walked back.
I don't think that there's some conspiracy. I don't think they got together and said, let's invite Dave because, he's going to maintain censorship and Jewish control. I don't believe that.
You think he's like a psychological operation?
Yeah, effectively, yes.
Okay.
And I don't think he's doing that knowingly, but I think that they're creating the bounds of the debate by having him be the spokesperson.
So anyway, it's good to keep a skeptical eye, but this next clip is good because I think it summarizes Nick's racial worldview very well.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I think it's important just on a basic level to say that we don't agree on everything.
Sure.
We are distinct, and I wouldn't even say it's about further or closer. It's just that we are coming at it from different places. You believe it's the neocons, and it's in particular the War Party and Israel and how those interact. And me, as an identitarian, I do look at the world through an identity-based lens, that you've got whites, blacks, Jews, and they all have political interest. They all identify as these groups. They group up based on them. And then those groups have conflicting interests. And what I see there is still a distilled Jewish self-interest, which is okay because we're all people and we're all advocating for the most for ourselves. But in America, we just need to do a better job of managing that. And I think that the Jewish community is out of control.
So again, saying things like the Jewish community is out of control is exactly the kind of rhetoric that contributes to the excesses of anti-Semitism and all that shit that Nick Fuentes claims to be against. So I just reject this framing to begin with. And as far as the degree to which race and race realism is and should be present in modern politics, that's a separate thing. I had a lengthy conversation with FD Signifier about my evolution of race consciousness. So if you're interested in my thoughts on that, you can watch that. But let's get this last clip from Nick because it's pretty important.
It seems that society is always being pushed by this organized minority. Because you're right, there are Rawlsian liberals that are white, and there are, evangelical Christians that are white that are neocons. But it just seems like the Jews because by definition, they're organized in a way that nobody else is. Like Bush is not organized as a white guy or even very much as a Christian. But you do have like a World Zionist Congress. You do have a World Jewish Congress. You have the, Conference of Major American Jewish Organizations. I don't even think people realize the extent to which Jews are organized in community centers by Chabad, in university with their fraternities, and in business, and in their localities. It's like they're extremely organized. And as far as the average Jew is concerned, yeah, they're not running the banks. I don't think your average Jew is like a spy. But I do think that your average Jew is inherently distrusting of like patriotism and nationalism. It's like Sarah Silverman said when she saw her white boyfriend put a American flagpole on her lawn, she said it reminded her of Hitler. How many Jews is that attitude prevalent? When they saw Trump, they thought the same thing. Fascism. They said it could not happen here. It's sort of that same attitude. And I think here is what I will concede. I think that by we, I mean me, if my movement wants to have power and really put America first, it means we are going to have to sideline, by definition, Jews that put the Jewish nation first.
Okay, several things here. First, please let's never use Sarah Silverman as an example of anything ever. The idea that the average American Jew has an inherent distrust of nationalism and patriotism, that's an empirical claim, and it's just one I think is just straight up false. I was in a fraternity in college, and there were many Jewish fraternities, and the idea that the average sort of Jewish frat bro who's just as conservative and culturally identical essentially to, whatever white Christian frat bro comes to mind. The idea that they're inherently distrustful of American nationalism, I don't buy that. But again, it is true that there are American Jews who might not hate, American nationalism, but they feel a greater sense of nationalism towards Israel. And to the point that Jewish people are very organized across different organizations, all centered around Jewish identity. That's just objectively, verifiably true. And there's other cultures like this. Greek Orthodox tend to be pretty tight-knit, but no other minority has the level of influence in American politics than Jewish people. And it's just not even worth engaging with people who dispute that, again, objectively verifiable fact. Is the solution to start organizing around racial lines like white identitarian lines? I don't think so. Because the fact that Jews have a lot of power and influence is not a bad thing. Most of these Jews have power and influence because they're very competent and they do a lot of good and they produce a lot of good technology and culture and all kinds of things that come from people who are able to achieve that level of power and influence in society. The problem is not that there is a small minority that wields outsized influence and power. The problem is the degree to which that minority wields that power and influence in a way that is beneficial to a foreign nation at the cost of American interests. Like, for example, pushing for people to be censored for criticizing Israel and claiming that it's to stop anti-Semitism and all that stuff. And yeah, there's a lot to be said on this. I will end with this last clip from Dave Smith because I think it just summarizes the key thing that everyone needs to remember when talking about this topic.
The overwhelming majority of Jews are pursuing the same strategy that most people are pursuing, which is like, I want to raise my kids. I want to have decent health care. I want to have a decent life. I want to hang out with my buddy. I don't think they're pursuing these grand political strategies. I mean, no more so than anybody is who just they have their disposition to like, I'm liberal or I'm conservative or I'm this.
So that's that. This conversation was 3.5 hours long, and I obviously just pulled one small section of it, but I think those are the relevant clips. I'm curious to hear what people think. And until next time, good luck and Godspeed.